Today we're going to talk about availability security. It's kind of a weird concept, right? We just talked about the CISSP, CISM, all these professional designations, Security Plus, CISA, CISPA. And we learned that security is about confidentiality at the end of the day, and or integrity, and or availability. And then it's funny when you go through the study materials, right, and you go through it and they talk about availability-based security. I don't care which of the designations you go through. They always use the same example when it comes to availability. They use a Smurf attack from 1997, right, for a ping attack or something like that. Today we're going to go in a little deeper on the availability side of the house. So I thought we'd talk about three things. Let's call it 35 minutes. Pretty simple. Trends, a case study, and then some recommendations. Pretty simple. Does that sound fair? All right. Just an item of note so you know where we're coming from. Radware is the largest enterprise provider of attack mitigation solutions, and that's where most of today's material is going to come from essentially field experience. We're deployed at all the stock exchanges, and most of where companies view a second as vital to business operations, right? We're going to talk through the threats associated with that, and it's an emerging field. In my mind, this whole world is beginning to look like what I would call the preclinical trials of cyber warfare. I don't like going too bombastic or too overload, but as you start going through what we're experiencing out there, the processes, the procedures, the way in which these campaigns are being conducted, the way in which they're being choreographed, orchestrated, you can see a distant future, maybe not too distant future, where this stuff can get a lot more organized and a lot more powerful. And as security professionals, it is different. And that's the case I look to make to today. I look for your feedback too. We're going to go through a new motive. We're going to go through new attacks. We're going to go through the efficacy of these attacks. We're going to go through the incidents, essentially the rate of the increase of the attacks. And we're going to go through what is the notion of what you call in a playground self-defense, what we call active defense. It's a term that is evolving because people are very uncomfortable with it. We're going to talk through that. Does that sound fair, too, for the trends? Okay. So here's the main trend, the main thing you take away and you go home, and if you tell your children anything, they go, "What did you do today?" I heard this keynote about availability attacks becoming mainstream. So this is not about confidentiality, which is the world we lived in for a while. We're going to talk through that. This isn't about integrity. Both of those are very important. The residual risks, there's nothing taken away from them. This availability-based risk, though, is an emerging problem. So let's talk through that, the motive. If you take name brand attacks, attacks that stick in the heads of executives, if you will, you know, the sort of marketing press attacks, the ones that people remember. And if you look at them and you cascade them on a list over the last 12 years, they look sort of something like this. You may come up with a different set yourself, but they're going to look something like this. And when you begin to choreograph which ones were motivated under which kinds of motivation, you begin to realize trends that basically there are fundamentally two kinds of motivations which drove most of the security defense posture from which we've been essentially part of for the last 10, 12 years. One motivation, if you've been in this industry like I have for a while, you remember the Sunnyvale, California kids that had an NT40 technique, and you had an NT40 vulnerability, and as a result, you were a victim of somebody's opportunistic or vandalistic kind of attack. And people would ask you why. You remember these things, and it still continues today. Why do people do this kind of stuff? And it's and you kind of go back with this response like, I don't know. I really don't know why they do it. I guess it's cool, it's cachet, it's kitschy, right? So that was a large part of it. It moved quickly to a motive, and this is the primary motive, which was financial, right? Sometimes it was personal financial, personal motive to monetize something, and then it went to cartel or group-like or essentially transnational-like organizations that were built around monetizing data or information or processing resources, right? Essentially being able to have a financial motive on the attack. Those are the two worlds we have been designed to do risk assessments about. We've been designed to do our deployment of controls about. Those are the two motives en masse that we've had in our head. Why do I need this firewall? Why do I need this data leakage protection? Why do I need to comply with this law? Why do I need to do it? It's because of this. It's because of this. And it all rolls up to motivation en masse. I tell people this. I don't know if you're the same. I anticipate if you've been in security for a while, you're the same, that you don't really try to think about the individual motive, but because you can't get into some heads of some of these people. And there's a lot of motive. There's a transnational motive that's not listed here, and that's a little bit of a bigger problem. But over the last 24 months, there has been this motive, the primary motive, to be something different, which is called hacktivism, right? Hacktivism has what motive? Think about that for a second. First and foremost, the very first motive. What's the motive? Brand destruction? Or name destruction, something like this? If you think about hacktivists, the ones that are brand named, right? The folks that people know, Anonymous, LulzSec, Antisec, maybe if you know the Jester or IDF team, maybe if you know Wikiboat. These folks all have essentially roll up their motive to one primary goal. They're first and foremost about an ideological based attack, right? They don't like something about somebody else, and they want to either stop it, change the behavior, or start something. But it's not about money, first and foremost. Every once in a while it ends up about money, just like everything in life, right? And it's about shutting somebody up, stopping something over there. I don't like your opinions here. I don't like your religion. I don't like your actions. You are doing something to these kids and I want you to stop. I don't like the promotion of this law, right? That's hacktivism. That's the motive, right? Ideological based attacks. That's what's going on. And when motive changes, I'm going to show you something here in a second. Risk changes, right? Anybody disagree with that? You might unintentionally be at risk for something that you didn't see because the motive wasn't residually there from the past, wasn't historically really a big en masse problem, right? Moreover, you may have missed, if your risk assessments aren't current, the deployment of an adequate control relative to the riskiness that you are onboarded, right? For example, if you work for a company that is a bad boy company, are you familiar with any of these companies? So I'm going to show you the names here in a minute. There's these like evil bad boy companies, right? I contemplated actually doing a bad boy video for you. Videos just don't go over all that well, you know. And it's just always a problem, right? So, if it's a new motive, it should then therefore have different characteristics to it, right? Think about this. Are the controls that you put in place for financial motive and opportunistic motive the same controls that are required to protect yourself from a risky situation associated with somebody who's after you? Right? Are you? I can tell you what's different. At least when I was doing security at Campbell's and at Barclaycard, my model, maybe it was different for you, was it was very hard to be otherwise because the way the money flow was at some point the risk overcomes the control cost and you make a decision that you're not going to deploy the technology control or the operational control. You're going to deploy an audit control or policy control and administrative control because the incidence of that stated risk is very low, right? So you normally are doing some sort of 80-20, 90-10, 95-5 in terms of deployment of controls. In the world of hacktivism, it has a very specific set of characteristics to it, which are very different. And one of them is when you get attacked, unlike financial motive or motive that's associated with opportunism. If your walls, if your controls are very good, indeed, if they're the best in your industry, that doesn't forego an attack like it does in a financial motive. You know what? I'm not going to go to company A. Geez Louise, do they have a program? I can get my credit card, my financial account information from the next door neighbor, right? That's all I'm really looking for. These dopes over here don't know what they're doing. These guys are pretty good. It's a lot less effort over here, right? Opportunism, well, these guys have high walls. Those guys have low walls. This is a really big blank white wall, and I have a digital spray paint can. In this world, you are the victim if you are the target, right? In hacktivism, the attack focus is different. The attack target sets are different. The attack warning is different. The execution, dramatically different, right? And in terms of the who is at risk for this, different. There are whole new industries who, prior to this en masse motivation, really didn't have to do much in security, but overnight has changed. Think about this for a second. If you're in the oil and gas business, and you're not publicly listed, what kind of compulsory requirement do you have to do security? What law out there? What's the requirement? I drill, I get some natural resource out of the ground, I pump it to somebody else, they get me money, but it's very few customers that actually transact with me in terms of dollars. It's not personal private information. What kind of security do I really have to do, right? You think gas companies are hated by people that are activists? Like every other operation gets a pipeline company, a natural gas company, right? An oil company, electric company that's got burning, coal or something like this, right? And I don't mean to get into the ideology. My point is that there's industries that have overnight found themselves in a dramatically different state, right? How about this notion of attack warning? If it's an ideological-based attack, it's not quiet, right? Because they automatically tell you what their problem is. I got a problem with you. I want you to stop suing these kids, Sony. I want you to stop giving the government your software, HB Gary. I want you to show my organization better in your software programs, Activision. I want you to stop supporting SOPA, GoDaddy, right? They tell you ahead of time. Not only do they want, they demand. The demands come with ultimatums, right? So they tell you ahead of time. How many people today are monitoring whether or not you are really on a target list, that you've been filed a grievance against by one of these hacktivist organizations? I can tell you by historical standards, this is still an evolving security process, essentially habit. People are just waking up to the fact that they have to begin to understand that almost at any moment they may have, let's face it, pissed somebody off somewhere that's decided to get a bunch of cyber pitchforks and the cyber torches, bring people together to perpetrate an attack. And you should be able to be aware of it. Sony, Operation Sony, the first one, right? There's been a number since then, right? They wanted them to stop suing those kids down in Australia because they jailbroke the PlayStation 3. This premise that Sony was attacked somehow is lost. Why, right? They weren't just attacking Sony because they didn't like the way they designed the PlayStation or something like this, right? They had a very specific purpose. Sony Movies was not attacked. Sony Music was not attacked. Nintendo was not attacked. They could care less about Nintendo. Sony was suing two kids and they wanted them to stop it, right? According to the security department of Sony, how many of them thought, today there's a lady that gives a presentation. She's a really great lady. She's a former security person at Sony. And by the way, how many people at Sony PlayStation security have jobs today? Anybody know the answer to that? If you came to my presentation yesterday, you can't answer. Anybody know? 0. It's 0. Yeah, the answer is 0. So it's unfortunate, right? And it's not because they didn't do the typical security thing where they identified the risk and they popped it on up to executive managers and they said, oh, okay, we recognize the risk and we're not going to do anything about it. It didn't help them at all. It came to the fact that they had their hearts ripped out of them, right? The point there is that they did not know they were even under attack, that they were subject to a dramatically risky changing landscape, which happened overnight, really, fundamentally. Anybody know that those kids continue to be sued by Sony after their attacks? Again, you can't answer if you were my presentation yesterday. Right.
No.
The answer is no. Yeah. They actually pay those kids today. They're on Sony's payroll. So it's kind of a... So are these attacks effective? Is this motivation effective? It's not 100%, right? This is anonymous, right? It's almost a daily kind of thing. I don't like this. I don't like that. You know, it sounds like kids out there that just want their way. But they get their way, sometimes. Is hacktivism bigger than financial attacks? Well, if you believe our report, or Arbor's report, or Verizon's data breach report, or Imperva's report, or Cisco's report, the answer is yes. So the question you ask yourself, if that's true, what are we doing to adjust our infrastructure to this, to adjust our risk profiles to become aware whether or not we're in a situation that may actually have been more risky than we intended, right? So what's going on today in terms of hacktivism? Who's on the target list? Who's on the bad boy list? You guys familiar with Operation Defense 2? This started with May Day, right? They have a whole schedule of events. Like I said, it's pre-announced, right? These are the companies that are being attacked, and these are the schedule of events. It's essentially the attack plan, right? I don't understand. Verizon's always on it, but Comcast isn't, you know? Wait a second, you know? Let me ask you this. Is hacktivism an external threat? Is it an external threat?
Both.
So when you say both, you say it's an internal threat.
Yeah.
You're right. It's an ideological-based attack. We're in front of, as a customer, this is public knowledge now, PayPal and eBay during Operation WikiLeaks. And I can tell you definitively that in just about all sorts of circumstances, when there's a movement that's very large, you're going to have sympathizers, right? You think these companies should be reviewing exactly what's going on inside their company? There's a great article that's out there, and do a Google on it when you get it. It says Anonymous is the most powerful organization in the world. And the point they make in the article, and, you know, I don't agree with the premise that they're the most powerful, but the point they make in the article is profound in that they suggest they don't need to hack to get their information. They simply just have people give it to them because they have access to the information they need. They just ask. And there's somebody somewhere that has a role or a position that believes in the effort, and they provide. That's the point of the article, whether or not it's true or not, right? It's a very interesting premise. So, Operation Newson. Anybody know this one? Here's the other bad boy list, in case you're wondering. I don't know how this list came together, because it's all over the places. Beth's blog, and then there's H.B. Gary, and then there's Allianz, and then there's Bank of China, and these kinds of companies, right? So all over the place. Anybody know Operation Newson? It's for execution tomorrow. These companies are all targeted for tomorrow. McDonald's, Best Buy. I don't know how Best Buy gets on there. I guess maybe somebody pissed off an anonymous member on a router or something like that. And but it's crazy, right? Right, exactly. This is for tomorrow, this list. Believe me, a lot of these companies, I know, are just becoming aware of it today, right? Can you imagine if you're trying to review whether or not you're going to be adequate to the attack tools that Anonymous deploys on an operation that was announced a few days ago, and they now have on LinkedIn, on Facebook, over 20,000 supporters of. What kind of damages can they do, right? Is hacktivism just one-sided? Is it just anonymous? I'll answer the question a little rhetorical. No, hacktivism is if you have a strong belief and you can gather people together and they're able to act on it, right? The Jester, if you're familiar with him, write him down. If you're not, follow him. He's been around since September 11th. He's been taking down jihadist websites. He's actually at war with Anonymous. At times, it really rages. It's like a Batman Jester situation, or Batman Robin. So I'm going to give you a mental model here. This is the way I think of things, and as for what it's worth. In the old days, we really had to deploy controls in an 80-20 rule, right? I think for the old motives, it was very pragmatic, and it made sense. If you are really a company that a second means money, and you're a company that's very likely to be on a list at some point, if you deploy an 80-20 model of security controls, these folks will target you until they find the 20% of controls that you've acknowledged is a risk and you put no operational technical control around, right? Because it was unlikely to be breached. And then they'll breach it. That's why these big companies like Visa and MasterCard have gone down. It's not because they didn't know what they had in place. It's because they didn't put a technical control. Why? Because it wasn't ever supposed to happen. So the way I like to think of controls in this world, for this risk, this availability-based risk, is this house. Anybody know what this house is? You know it? It's a zombie house. Zombie-proof house. This is a real house. You can do a Google on it. It's fascinating, right? This house, which I'm kind of fond of, but this house, it is very contemporary casual. It looks like a California house. It's actually in Poland, of all places. I guess they're afraid of Polish zombies. This house turns into, that's right, this one doesn't go through my clicker. This house, during the day, looks like a normal contemporary casual house. When under a zombie attack, it can transform and close its 2-foot concrete shutters and its steel cages to a zombie-proof house, right? Complete with all of the zombie-proof exterior controls and protections. They have actually volumetric protection. And there's a great description on the website about this, about the notion that they couldn't have a chain link fence and they couldn't have a wood fence because if you get to a certain amount of people per square foot and they lean on the fence, it'll fall on over, right, and so forth. And they actually couldn't have, they didn't have a need for Constantine wire. Anybody know the reason why? They can't jump, right? Zombies can't jump. They're dead. They don't have the ability to jump, Yeah. So it's all out there on the website, and trust me, this house really exists, and all the defenses on the roof, all the mechanicals are on the roof, so you have to take out the zombies with a headshot and so forth. But this house was designed for volumetric attacks, if you will, many stupid, if you will, zombies, and that are pervasive. And if you give them one spot, one finger hold, one place where you looked for a control but you overlooked the technical control, they'll find it. Right? Then you get in. I know it's an extreme analogy, but I like it. All right. So, trend 2. I spent a lot of time on that, so I'm going to move through the rest of these pretty quickly. The availability attack comeuppance. So do you understand where I'm going with this? Motive to me is a very big deal. I think we're missing the boat on understanding the difference on this. I think it is substantial. I think availability, security is something that we have to think harder about. It is the world, let me show you this. It is the world of different attacks. If you believe in the CIA triad and you understand availability vulnerabilities, right? These are not just DDoS, because DDoS assumes distributed, and they're not always distributed. I'll give you some cases on that if you like. But there are a lot of times sole source attacks, single attacks that are very, very effective. A lot of times they're intrusion events that are very, very effective. So it's not just volume that this is about. This is about taking you down and shutting you up. If you believe Black Hat, the last 2 years, the number one category of vulnerability exploitation has been in the realm of physical attacks, right, at the firmware and getting batteries to burn up and printers to arc and spark and all that kind of stuff, right? And you can see how this stuff plays together very nicely from a cyber warfare perspective. Essentially, you have a payload and you have a throughput. So these are the availability-based attacks. There is a million different ways to describe security, right? And one of my favorite ways is using a castle, so I'm gonna use a castle. I apologize if it's oversimplification, but I like castles. And they're fun, right? So if you think about castles, right, castles are pretty fascinating creatures in terms of the way they've been designed and how they evolved. They did a lot of what we do in information security, right? They had deployment of a DMZ. They had deployment of a single link, or they marshaled all traffic to a point from which they did inspection. Sometimes it was authentication out front. Sometimes it was content inspection. They normally had a notion where you went from unauthorized to authorized. They had a notion of being able to do sentry reviews, signature reviews. If you see somebody with this characteristic from that vantage point, you need to tell somebody that, right? They did content inspection. And it was all built around the notion that the business got done inside the castle, right? That's where the towns were, that's where the markets were, that's where the people were, that's where the resources were. As time evolved, and this is essentially the same way that we design security, right? Today, and as castles evolved, they moved into open markets, and it was the traffic flow to and from the castle picked up, just like it did for us. And in fact, as time moved on, what you had was the way the castle's daily operations required always having the door open in order to get the castle to function. They no longer have meat. The meat is outside the castle. We couldn't have livestock inside the castle. It had to be outside the castle. If you want to eat, I need the door open. If you seize my door, I can't eat. We have cloud services. Today, we can't conduct our businesses without talking to other businesses. Today, the link is the way in which we get things done. That link down, your server down, that main thoroughfare down, you can't get things done, right? Some businesses are built around seconds, right? Papa John's is a big client of ours. You know, it's kind of crazy. I think of a pizza place. I don't think pizza is a second equals money in pizza, right? I just don't think that way. Papa John's does 80% of its business online, which is crazy to me. I guess I'm a weirdo when it comes to getting my pizza. I still pick up the phone and make a call, you know. But evidently people, you know, put in a little, and they even have an app, and they say, listen, you know, and then they fulfill it through their local little bakeries and so forth. That's all aggregated worldwide. Between 4 and 6 o'clock p.m., they miss 5 minutes. It's millions of dollars. Unbelievable, right? StubHub, all these companies, stockbrokers and so forth, time equals seconds, right? This is the way business gets done. So you attack the areas where you can most affect and put the hurt on the availability of the organization, right? And the way it works in availability security is not just to attack a single vector. Now, in financial motive, when you're looking at intrusions and so forth, people would landscape all of the available vectors to get into your environment. And when they found one that was successful, that's all you needed. And then from there, you begin the process of continuing to cascade permissions and get in. When you're after an availability attack, if I get through the front door, that's not enough. I want your windows, I want your garage door, I want your back door. I want every possibility for you to get to and from and out of your house down. That's the way this works. It's called multi-vector, right? This is the way they do it. Multi-vector, multi-vulnerability, that's kind of the geeky word, which I don't really understand. And, but this is the way I think of it, right? In those worlds of attacks, in 2011, those attacks against all of those vectors broke down almost 50-50 application-oriented and 50% network-oriented. If you take a look at the network-oriented attacks, 50% of them roughly were stateless. And of the application-level attacks, by the way, application-level attacks being 50% is huge. Huge, right? Because volume application attacks are not volumetric. You cannot solve availability problems with bandwidth on application level attacks. In fact, on some techniques, you can exacerbate the problem. This is my, I call it my bubble chart, my balloon chart, right? So there are tools. The good news is there are tools. There are things that you can do that are effective, that help you eradicate, help you detect, help you get clarity, help you choreograph a defense, help you essentially fight this, right? It requires architecture, yes. It requires tools, yes, clearly, and it requires the ability to detect. There are some tools that are not effective. They're essentially snake oil, right, in this world. They're not to say they're not very effective in confidentiality or integrity, but in availability, they're not your aspirin. These are the tools that are good today, right? So in this multi-vulnerability world, the problem that we have is that we have great tools to handle all the vectors. We have great tools to handle all the intrusions. The problem is that there's not one, right? And there's not one process. So you are left with deploying the controls, choreographing the detection, choreographing the response, and then handling making sure that you can keep your environment up. That's the essentially technical solution that's out there today, right? So trend 4 is that the attack incidence is quickly rising, right? As I mentioned, there's a report out there that we did in 2011 for all of the attacks that we serviced in 2011 at Radware. And we also did a survey of people that were not customers. And you see here there's tremendous changes in who actually became a risky industry. Governments, you know, I don't know if you've been following, but the Russian elections were a disaster from a cyber attack perspective. You know, cities that are hosting both of the U.S.-based political parties are being threatened. You know, both Tampa and Charlotte. If you're affiliated, you know, it's like a politician. If they say something, one side's going to be mad, right? And they start attacking them and so forth. The only industry that really has stayed constant in this world in terms of attack risk has been the gaming industry. For whatever reason, the gaming industry is an availability, they have high availability problems in terms of risks, but it's financially motivated, right? What you find in the gaming industry is that you get some folks that are trying to slow down other people's bets. That's basically what goes on. So they're trying to gain a financial advantage. So it's not ideological based, it's purely financial based. All right, trend 5, availability-based attacks. Can you stay in your house closed up with the zombies outside your wall forever? I mean, you're not at risk, right? If you will, you've scrubbed your perimeter, your environment. Can you stay there forever? It's a tough question. We're in front of the Vatican. The Vatican has, since March 7th, experienced an attack every single day. And these attacks can last 12 to 16 hours. Some of them just go on. And it's crazy. They start at 2 o'clock every day. And it's like it's somebody's job to come and go attack the Vatican. You know? And sometimes it's always different techniques. It's like they sit back and they have, oh, let's try this today. And then, oh, how about that over there? It's pervasive. It's annoying as heck, right? Every once in a while they're effective, which constantly feeds their success criteria. Oh, we did this once. That was a chess game, constantly back and forth. In this world, unfortunately today, the cyber world, it is a lot like the frontier back in our country before it was a country, where there was land that was somewhat settled, but there was no government, and that you took with you what you had and you defended yourself with what you brought, and that from time to time, maybe if it got very, very bad, you might be able to somehow get news out to the cavalry to be able to help you, which has got a reputation to this day as always being a day late and a dollar short, right? And it's sort of the same thing. In this world, I know, I'm going to show you some attacks here, and I've sat on some of the most critical infrastructure in this country while it was being attacked. And I sat across with and went around some of our largest law enforcement folks, and they try the best. But the laws, are not up to the threats and how they can basically be able to assist you. You have what you have, and you take with what you take, and the governments have very little ability to stop most of this stuff. I can get into great detail, we can talk about it philosophically, but it's clearly legally in the geo-legal structure can't stop this stuff. That's why we continue to be talking about it. So the attacks are growing. If you're not familiar with LOIC, low orbit ion cannon, or HOIC, high ion, or any of these inner circle attacks, right? These we see every single day. The volumetric network tools, the volumetric application tools, the non-volumetric low and slow tools, and the vulnerability-based tools, RefRef being the most notable of them. These are the tools that you see. And if you're going to attack, you might be able to use all that technology I showed you prior. You can choreograph it, find the blind spots in technology, the detection, and then do the mitigation. What a world we live in, right? For security professionals, it's really getting tough. However, once you start scrubbing, this is the New York Stock Exchange in October. Once you start scrubbing, and you are effective at your wall, at your perimeter inbound, now you have to think about, how do I stop this at my perimeter outbound? Right? We're going to talk about this. This is what a typical attack looks like. I'm going to go through a case study here. This is not the case study. I just want to give you a quick case. Even the case study I'm going to show you is going to be very quick. This, if you take a look at one moment in time, this was in the fall, they get attacked a lot. This is not atypical. There was on their wire, on their detection. This happened to be a very aggressive attack, but it wasn't atypical in terms of the vectors. You had on the wire, at the very same moment, and up until this point, a lot of what I talked about sounds ethereal. This is what it looks like when it's actually happening, right? You have on the wire stateless attacks, stateful attacks, layer 3 attacks, layer 4 attacks, layer 5 attacks, layer 7 attacks. You got volumetric, you have non-volumetric, you have tools, you have techniques. You have to detect, discern, triage, and be able to react to all of that at the same time, right? That's what it looks like. Look at the scrubbers, right? The scrubbers, if you just had IPS, you're down. Signature's only caught half of it, right? If you have hardware-based DOS, caught half of it. Behavioral, caught a third of it, or most of it, so forth and so on. ACL's important tool, right? It's tough. It's a tough world. So active defense has become a very strong consideration for a lot of companies. This is the notion where you can actually begin the process of removing the attack itself. I won't get into this in great detail. I just want to introduce the concept to you because this is happening a lot. Essentially, companies are taking self-defensive mechanisms because that's all they have. I was just, there's a tire company, a retail tire company out of Phoenix. And we went in there and they had this problem where they were scrubbing at the edge, but they had this enormous amount of screen scraping and attacks, invasive scanning that was going on. And when they removed it, using some active defense techniques, they removed 90% of their traffic. It was unbelievable. 90% of their traffic was competitors trying to get pricing information, doing bots on their information, trying to scrape as much as possible, as far as possible, right? Being invasive in their scans, trying to take them down, too. It's crazy. It's a crazy world. All right, so those are the 5 trends. Yeah, I don't sleep at night all that often. I like to get up. So I don't know how you guys are about it. But so, as I said, availability-based attacks. So we're going to go through a case study. It just happened. If you can take a look at the dates, this just happened, right? This is the National CERT of India. On the 3rd of May, the Department of Telecom ordered all ISPs in the country of India to start blocking file sharing sites. That's a no-no in the anonymous world, right? You really want to draw a little bigger risks. They really like their Pirate Bays, BitTorrents, that's very, very... So you can see here, they started getting attacked. And you can go through the list here. And when you do these things, you should expect these kinds of results. And when you expect the results, this is what the results look like. First time we've witnessed the HOIC tool in the wild, right? The HOIC tool's been out there for a while. I'm sure it's been used. but on against India, and they took India. They took the National Computer Emergency Response Team down. If you saw that, now, I'm not going to get. I'm not. This isn't a vendor presentation, but we weren't there. They called us up 4 hours later and so forth, and we helped them. We helped them up, but up until that point, what an embarrassment, right? Your computer emergency response team has no ability to respond. Nothing. Down. It's actually scary, isn't it? To me, it's scary. So what were they using? They were using these 4 vectors. If you take down BitTorrent in your country, file sharing, this is what's going to come at you. I mean, it's a simple, it's amazing to me that this was a surprise to them. But they came at them with very sophisticated attacks. Push attacks, which is a garbage flood. We've been seeing this a lot more in the last 6 weeks. Push attack, garbage flood, no sins. I don't know how they generate them, actually. Must be a pretty interesting toolbar. No sins, no acts, just push acts. Garbage flood with payload. Really powerful flood. Hoik tool. Hoik, if you're not familiar with Hoik, I talked about it yesterday. Going to be a very future, really formidable tool. Slow lowers. It's the low and slow attack, non-volumetric attack, very, very powerful. And invasive network scans. The only thing they didn't do that's very powerful too is a UDP fragment flood. All right, recommendations. I'm not in the professional services business. I was, but I'm not. But I'm telling you that we have not cascaded the risk in our environments. We're ignorant to the risk associated with this. I know this because when I was at SunGuard for 6 years, I ran a business that did risk assessments, every flavor, technical, compliance. In $150 million worth of business, I could tell you 2 times that companies said, I want you to test me, and I don't care if we go down. You know? Everybody else said, I don't want service disrupting tests, right? So all the tool manufacturers, I don't care what tools you use, Qualys, you know, which I love, Tenable, blah, blah, blah. I don't care if it's scanners, web application scanners, pen testing tools. They all come with the notion that they're not going to use invasive procedures to have service disrupting. You had to do very special things to those tools. In fact, you had to override some decent controls on the tools to be able to test things like this. So what I suggest you do is do that, right? Go take these tools and put them in your infrastructure. Test your current infrastructure in a test environment. Take these tools. You can find them. They're out there. I mean, they're distributing them all over the place. And test your infrastructure. You'd be surprised what you find, really. It's pretty amazing. And then you ask yourself the question again that I started with, which is our current control infrastructure and the current designed architecture adequate for these attacks? You can answer that question, but you have to do the analysis, right? Look beyond large attacks. I can tell you, if you think still availability-based attacks or bandwidth-based attacks, that's 5-year-old thinking, right? It's no longer just that. 50% attacks are application-oriented. They're non-volumetric. They're less than a gig. Secure potential bottlenecks. Do you know which one of your environments, devices will go down first based upon what kinds of attacks? These are interesting analyses to do. Watch for blended attacks, partner up with companies. You see what I'm saying here is that you've never had to do these things because the motivation has never really been out there. There's 2 major motivations that's changing. One is that people are using these tools. The second is the businesses are being more required to be up, right? I think they're symbiotic in terms of the relationship, and now our business is changing. Man, you guys are looking at me like my dog watches TV. What questions do you have for me? That's all I have.
On the matter of hacking back,
Right.
how do you guide companies to that avenue? What are
I'm sorry, say that again?
the hacking back, the counterattack? That's a very touchy topic. It's kind of new. I'm just curious what kind of guidance you
Yeah,
provide.
people are really
companies.
funny about this, right? They get all kind of queasy and like, I don't really like this. Isn't it illegal to do this and kind of stuff? So the answer is yes, 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 right? So here's the truth. You cannot use the same techniques that they're using on you, right? And not in this country, right? Because it is illegal, right? There are few countries in the world that a volumetric attack is established law as being unlawful. The truth is, around the world, in almost all countries, there's no laws to this. right? Now, it doesn't mean they're not violating our law. It doesn't mean I can't go to Medellin and pull a kid out of a building and bring him to the country and adjudicate him, right? It just means I got to go to Medellin and go down there and pull a kid out of a building and adjudicate him. And that's just not really all that feasible that often, right? So the answer is, though, is that there are plenty of techniques that you can do that are legal. I'll give you an example. These tools I showed you, they're not RFC compliant. They're not IEEE compliant. They're not used to being talked to. In fact, they really are pretty pathetic tools from an HTTP perspective, from an actually web application perspective. And they tip over far easier than your tools of tipping them over. So, for example, LOIC, the original binary version of LOIC. You hold a connection open on a couple of LOIC things, you deny all the servers. All you do is you hold the connection open. I'm not putting anything on a line, but I'm holding it open. Now, you're not going to think about this at the time of an attack. You're going to have to pre-think this out and know what to do. You have to get a battle plan for the tools that you're going to be attacked with and know exactly how to demonstrate a forfeiture of that tool on their side. What you want to do is deny the platform, right? And it's all platform. We used to have script kiddies. Today it's script appies, right? They're all an app. Give me an app, and I'm going to use that app against you, right? And those apps have become what essentially are our vulnerabilities. We are mistaken if we're just looking at the vulnerability and addressing the vulnerability. Like, for example, if you're just going, oh, you know what, I'm handling SYN floods, and I'm handling TCP FIN floods, and I'm also handling SQL injection, ref tools. The technique is one thing, the platform is another. If you know what the platform is on the other side, you know the techniques that are available to you, to them, to hit you on. And what you want is to deny that platform. And those platforms really are terrible right now. Eventually it'll get better. On Backtrack, for example, on the bootable CD, Backtrack, none of them handles a 302 response right now. None of the tools in the open source Backtrack, right? So you throw a redirect at it, and it doesn't know what the hell to do, right? And then eventually you're going to have to step up the game. A 302 is RFC compliant. There's nothing illegal against that, right? But you got to think it out, because believe me, when you're under attack, you're not going to be thinking that stuff out, right? This is all part of a different incident response plan, really. Thanks for the question, yeah. I know this makes people very uneasy, but I'm telling you, this is active defense. We are no longer in the world of just defense if this is a problem. If availability is a problem for you, you have to begin the process of thinking, at what point do you do active defense? Especially if you're really a hated company. You know, there are companies out there that people really don't like very much. I talked to a major fast food company, you know, one with the big arches, and they're like, how come people hate us? Why are we? I don't know. I guess maybe a high fructose corn syrup. I don't know what it is, you know. Any other questions? Yep. All right. So I went a little long. I appreciate it. If you have any questions at all, the presentation will be available. Carrie, I thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you very much.
Carl, thank you.